Far war. 2 volumes of what's called pictorial narratives reflecting on war and Holocaust led to triptychs. Now you see one triptych over there, it's 3 panels which join together and sort of cooperate. And then expanded to ever longer multi-panel serial projects, such as the Millipede, Ecce Homo, Rando, Eva, Cosmic Game, the Cosmic Game you see in back of you, and many others. Possession, for instance, of which there's a few samplings here, Possession consists of over 1,700 panels, and it's still growing. Ultimately, I gave up any semblance of consistent media, subject, form, or style, as well as any preconceived idea or agenda. I have none. I have a blank mind. My work depends entirely on imagery and images as they present themselves. As works in progress rather than products, I have no problem cutting, burning, and tearing up paintings, its fragments reconstructed into some always new assemblage. Many of my works are considered assemblages. I don't like the term collages. These are all French terms, collage, assemblage. Assemblage fits them best. I see creation, destruction, and reconstruction reflecting some grand, even cosmic process. Most of my art is intimately linked to what turned into a long, very long, and eventful life, very eventful. Curiosity and restlessness, which drives my art, reflects a restlessness in my very bones. While I grew up in Germany, I was, however, born in Poland in 1918. Within a year following yet another pogrom, the family fled to Berlin, Germany. In 1933, immediately after the Nazi triumph, I fled Germany, first to France, and then 1935 to America, returning to Europe in 1944 as an American soldier. And so my life has been one as a refugee, migrant, soldier, and finally as a restless wanderer, ultimately reflected in my art, unsettled and perhaps unsettling. My obsession with art began early while still in diapers. Given paper and crayons, a colorful world opened. Taken to a museum was heaven. I judged people by the paintings on their walls. As a 5-year-old in 1924, I was sent to Davos, Switzerland, to be cured of TB, tuberculosis. Overwhelmed with the magic of the snow-covered mountains, I announced, quote, "I'm going to be an artist." Many of my pictures were on mountains, but the mountains were on fire. Returning to Berlin, my parents decided to move out of the foul air of Berlin into the small village of Fischengrund, of fresh air, fields, and forests. Probably never having seen foreigners in their midst, especially Jews, I soon became, quote-unquote, that Polish Jew boy, and an easy punching bag for the village boys. This then, as a 6-year-old, was my initiation as a quote-unquote outsider, an unacceptable misfit. I retreated into my own world, the world of art, and that is where I would remain for the rest of my life. Far from Berlin, deprived of any museum visits, I created my own museum. It consisted of a collection of art reproductions in my own growing output of drawings and paintings. And I discovered a strange phenomenon. By moving pictures ever closer together, they appear to form some interesting relationships, even talking to each other. At least I heard them talking. A kind of pictorial dialogue. After a few years of fresh air and nature, we moved to Karlshorst, a suburb of Berlin. At the age of 13, every Jewish boy is expected to be mitzvahed. But stubborn, rebellious from the beginning, I offered to illustrate the Bible instead the traditional ceremony. I never cared much for any ceremony. I read the Bible not once but 3 times, and it has remained to this day a never-ending source of wonder. Karlshorst, I was delighted to discover, possessed a cinema, in which I would often disappear, pretending to go to the local library. In retrospect, I see movies as perhaps the most significant art form of this age. I decided to make my own movies. That was sometimes around 1930. I would illustrate some story on the scroll of parchment and roll it past the window cut into a box with an electric light inside of it. Karlshorst, I was delighted to discover, I got that. Soon after my 13th birthday, I had my first and quite successful gallery exhibition. Any notion or dream of a career was short-lived. Hitler came to power in 1933, and immediately I fled. First to France, and 2 years later, landing in America. It was the land of my childhood dreams. Within a year, this dream, however, was beaten out of me one Sunday afternoon in New York Central Park by a policeman reminding me that I still was and would remain unacceptable. Careers cannot be built trying to avoid the limelight and fear of recognition. With the outbreak of World War II and Germany's declaration of war, I enlisted in the army. Trained in military intelligence and psychological warfare, I returned to Europe. Once ashore, Omaha Beach, I proceeded, mostly by loudspeaker, to persuade German soldiers to surrender. Watching them past, their arms raised in surrender, restored a good measure of what I had lost in self-esteem. After sometimes fierce and bloody engagements through the lengths of France and Belgium, I was back in Germany. Near Weimar, I discovered Buchenwald. Coming face to face with its skeletal survivors, I sank to my knees, I collapsed, and I knew I was finished as a soldier. I returned home on a hospital ship, but it was the war which 10 years later led to the parade as Buchenwald led to a journey. The 2 volumes of pictorial narrative, and then on to where are you? And on to the imagery of hell that awaits most every soldier. What I and some of my comrades did in that war became the Ritchie Boys, the German documentary, which some of you may have seen. What haunts me still is the question, how was it possible? How could a nation like Germany, a civilization that had cultivated some of the finest minds and talents, descend almost overnight into the most abysmal barbarism? To face this dilemma is to confront oneself. Deep within that reflection may lie a monstrosity, dormant but easily roused by the first shrill bugle call. That bugle call can rouse not only mindless mobs, but also the so-called intelligentsia, civilized men of learning and culture. Does civilization then produce not only culture, art, and knowledge, but equally deadly power and the imagination and arrogance to use it? During my time in the army hospitals, was about 6 months, while in some of my more lucid moments I had time to think, mostly about war and its causes, it finally dawned on me. It is us, men, who periodically, crazed by testosterone, drives us again and again into this exciting blood sport of mass slaughter celebrated as war. Let women take over, I proclaimed when I finally returned home. Now, a half century later, a peaceful revolution is underway. Yes, women are replacing men as decision makers, hopefully leading to a gentler, more human world. Art is not a commodity, I proclaimed in 1985. I make a lot of proclamations. As I left the gallery and the art scene, and once again saw my career at an end. It was Ted Bartel, who's present here, president of IRP, the International Institute of Restorative Practices, who saved my work from resting now in the New Paltz garbage dump. As but one of many projects, the Si Lewen Museum and Gallery exists now in Bethlehem, and the Kardon Gallery being a branch of the museum. My life's work has found a home, and I'm deeply grateful. While I still hold to my belief that art is not a commodity, my work has re-entered the marketplace. All proceeds, however, go to further the worldwide humanitarian work of the Institute. And I thank you. Before there are any possible questions or comments, I have one more announcement. After I have a drink of water. One more announcement. While the Kardon Gallery for now features the work of yours truly, it intends, however, to show also the work of other artists, eventually. Artists who, for whatever reason, have, like myself, avoided the limelight. They are usually referred to as outsiders. Now, a few years ago, Montgomery College put on a two-generation show. My work, together with that of Damon Kardon, my grandson. As far as I know, there's only been one other multi-generation show, that of the Wyeth brothers as well as their father. Evidently, there's a genetic component to what I consider authentic artists. It should be a most interesting show, and I hope we can make the announcement of that show fairly soon, and you will all be invited to what should be really a very rare event. And again, I thank you all very much. Thank you. Any questions by any chance? Let's see if I have enough energy to answer. If there are no questions, very good. No questions, no answers.
Please mingle, and thank you so much for coming, and we're here for the duration.